Hi guys! Today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in March. March was kind of a weird reading month, not as weird as February. I had no DNFs, but I had a couple 3 stars, and I feel like I slogged kind of halfway through the month. It was also kind of a busy month for me. I traveled out of state, and that always takes a lot out of me, so I felt a little burnt out, and that definitely impacted my reading. So I didn't get to all the books that I wanted to on my TBR, but I did get to more than I expected to, especially in the last, couple of days, so I'm pretty satisfied overall. First up, we have Raybearer by Jordan Fueco. This is the first book in a duology. This is the UK cover that I just absolutely love. And this is a YA fantasy that follows a young girl named Tarasai who was basically created by her mother to fulfill a single wish. And that wish is to get close to the crown prince, and when she has his trust, to kill him. And it doesn't matter if Tarasai wants to do this or not. She is magically bound to. So we follow her as she's really wrestling with her own desires versus her mom's desires, and how Tarasai grows to understand love, both in the familial sense and the romantic sense. And this was just such a good YA story. The world building was so unique and interesting, and it truly felt YA in the sense that we grow with Tarasai from a child to her later teen years, and I just thought that was such an interesting and really transformative time for her. I love being able to follow characters as they grow, and she grows so much in this just one book alone. It was so fun to read, and the magic system was really cool as well. The political system was really interesting. I think if you're interested in sort of politics in your fantasy, this is a great sort of place to jump in. It's not so complicated that it's hard to follow, but it is very intriguing and very interesting. I just had so much fun with this one. I loved Tarasai, and I loved her relationships with her peers, and it was just so cool, and I can't wait to pick up book 2. So I give this a 4.5 out of 5, and yeah, I loved it. Then I picked up the much anticipated Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun by El Casamano, and I have to admit this is not my favorite in the series. I think some certain interesting things kind of developed, but for the most part, the main plot of this book was just kind of meh for me. This series as a whole follows a woman named Finley Donovan, who is a newly single mom. Her husband left her for their real estate agent before book 1, and she's adjusting to this new lifestyle, and she ends up hiring a nanny named Vera, and Vero quite literally becomes Finley's partner in crime, and they end up getting wrapped up in local mob drama. And while all that's going on, Finley is also a writer, and she gets mistaken for a hit woman while talking with her agent about the plot of one of her books. So she's also sort of using this real life experience to inspire her stories, which is a little risky in my opinion, but it's fun to watch. Again, this one just wasn't my favorite. I think some of the decisions they made were really frustrating. They do spend most of the plot of this book at a civilian police training academy. It was okay. I'll still read this series. I still have a lot of fun with it. I read it in a day. It's super fast and fun. I just didn't think this was the strongest installment in the series. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Then I picked up Paladins Strife by T. Kingfisher. This is the second book in the Saints of Steel series by her, which is a romantic fantasy series that is a lot of fun. It follows 3 different paladins' love stories, and these paladins all used to serve a god known as the Saint of Steel, and then one day their god died, and they are sort of left bereft and trying to fill that space that their saint used to take up within them and dedicate their lives to something else. And I think that struggle is written really well in this series. It definitely you follow some of these characters through their hardest mental spaces, and they're still able to find love, which I think is really beautiful. This book in particular follows the paladin Istvan and also a nun named Clara, and Clara is trying to save her sisters from basically being kidnapped, and Istvan helps her out, and they go on this long journey together. Meanwhile, the sort of mystery that is introduced in book 1 is followed up on in this book, and I think she was weaving a lot of plots together that were quite interesting. I loved seeing more of Istvan. I think he's so funny, and he's kind of the paladin that was like the least affected by the saint's death, but he's still not left totally unaffected, and it was interesting seeing him deal with those feelings. Clara was also a really fun character to follow. She has secrets of her own, and her and Istvan are more alike than they think they are, and their relationship, the like will they won't they, was really good. It's fun watching characters pine and struggle for one another, and my one complaint with this one is I think it was drawn out a little too long. I believe this is the longest installment in the series, and it did not need to be quite as long as it was. I did still have fun with it though, and I'm really excited for number 3, which is the final one. I'm a little sad, but I know Teen Kingfisher has a lot more romance fantasy up her sleeve, so I can't wait to get to those as well. This series has been so fun. So I gave this one 4 out of 5. I thought Paladin's Grace was definitely the stronger book, but this was still like a very enjoyable read. Then I picked up Becky Chambers's To Be Taught If Fortunate, which is a little novella, little sci-fi novella that follows a crew of scientists who basically volunteer to explore different planets that may or may not hold life and study the life that they do find. And this journey takes decades. The life that they lived beforehand is gone by the time they wake up from Cryosleep and explore each planet. And as they're exploring, they're getting messages from Earth and find it changing rapidly, like in their absence. And they're left kind of torn on like how they feel about that. Like it's something they knew that was going to happen going in, but a lot of the changes they did not anticipate. It was an interesting read. Our main character is an engineer, but the whole crew is really interesting as well. And I'm not much of a scientifically minded person myself, but just reading about people following their passion is always just like, I don't know, it hits me. This was like a really beautiful story about that, and like the advancement of scientific knowledge for the sake of the advancement of scientific knowledge. And yeah, it was beautiful. The ending is a little vague, but I didn't hate that. And yeah, overall, I thought this was really good. I did enjoy A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy a little bit better, just because they're a little bit more whimsical, and I think I prefer that in my sci-fi. But this was really good, and I think if you're just getting into sci-fi, this is an interesting place to start. Then I read an arc of Lokis Ring by Stina Leicht. In this one, we follow a ship captain named Gita, and she gets a message from her AI daughter from a unsanctioned section of space, and Gita is not sure why her daughter is there, but she needs to go save her from some mysterious thing. And this section of space is called Lokis Ring, and not much is known about Lokis Ring. It sort of just appeared, and it's dangerous and mysterious enough that no human government has laid claim to it at all, like, until now. I have to admit, the first couple of chapters, I was very confused. I had no idea what was happening. Stina Leicht introduces a lot of elements without any context, and you're just sort of left to pick up its meaning from, like, the context clues, and it left me a little, like, untethered feeling. I was just like, where are we? What are we doing? Who are these people? How can you be a parent to an AI entity? But once I got my bearings a little bit better, I thought this was quite interesting. It is very plot driven though, and you can tell the author was like juggling a lot of things, and I didn't know going into this is actually a multi-POV story, so in order to kind of cover the breadth of everything that's happening in all these moving parts, we follow different characters, and that threw me off a little bit because I thought we were just going to be following Gita, but this is like a rescue mission on top of a rescue mission on top of a rescue mission, so we have to follow several different characters to kind of get the full understanding of what's happening. So again, once I sort of acclimated to that, I didn't hate it, but I also didn't find myself feeling super attached to any of the characters. We just don't get enough time, I think, to develop with some of them, and so that kind of bummed me out a little bit, but oh well. I thought Lokis Ring was a really cool setting and like political problem. There's some really cool like cosmic horror things happening with it. But yeah, overall I thought this was pretty good. I don't recommend it if you were like a sci-fi noob, because I think like where I was uncomfortable the first couple chapters because I didn't know what was happening. I think if you are not familiar with sci-fi like at all, you'd be pretty tempted to put it down. Just because it's frustrating to be reading and like not understand what's going on. So if you can push through that, I recommend this book. It was a really fun space adventure and like a good standalone, I thought, as well. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up this bad boy. You may have heard of it, A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is the prequel to Priory of the Orange Tree, and it is a doorstopper, much like Priory is. So I don't know who I thought I was, thinking I was going to be able to read this and Mistborn and The Starless Sea this month. A crazy person. I don't know her. I don't know her. But I did commit to finishing this one this month. There was a couple days there. It was kind of touch and go. This is really good, but it's definitely like I had to commit all of my big brain energy to it this month, and I did not have a lot of that. So it all went towards this book. This book takes place about 500 years prior to Priory, and we follow some of the ancestors of the main characters in Priory, but overall, I thought the main POV characters, like the cast, was much stronger than in Priory of the Orange Tree. There were a couple of POVs in that book that we just felt kind of like a slog. They were important, but not the most interesting things going on, whereas A Day of Fallen Night, I loved every single POV character. They all had these really intriguing stories, and I felt for them and their struggles. And there's like a lot of themes of motherhood and bodily autonomy and sisterhood even that were explored, that I just thought like each character had such a strong like journey with, and I loved it. I will say, if you've read Priory, that book, and this isn't really a spoiler, deals with literal like world-ending events, like the world-ending event of this world. So in comparison, this one feels like not quite as high stakes, which is interesting because I feel like you get a lot more one-on-one like on the ground in battle time with some of the dragons and the worms that pop up in this series. So, like, I think if you didn't think there were enough dragons in Priory, I would definitely pick this book up because it definitely improves upon that. There was some really tense, scary scenes, but just, like, the stakes overall. Knowing what I know about Priory, I didn't know really what this book was necessarily going to be dealing with. It is revealed in the first couple hundred pages, but I think you have to be kind of fine with just following these characters and, like, they're establishing chapters and getting to know them a little bit more before like the main plot is super revealed. So I thought her writing was stronger, the characters were stronger, but the plot overall was maybe a little bit weaker, and that might just be because I know what I know about Priory. So I think this works really well independently if you don't want to read Priory first. I'm a little conflicted because, like, by the end of this one, I was like, man, I really want to reread Priory now. But I'm also kind of worried that it won't hold up as well because I think her writing has improved. And like I said, the characters are better in this one. So, like, I want to see how the actions that happen in this book ripple in time, because it's been a couple of years since I've read Priory of the Orange Tree. And some of the stuff felt like, I feel like this is important to the future, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how this is going to impact my, like, the reread value of Priory of the Orange Tree. But I am kind of itching to pick that one up again because, like, I think reading these back to back would be interesting. And I'm actually not really quite sure what order I would suggest reading them in. I think they work in either order. It's just a matter of, like, how Samantha Shannon has improved as a writer since Priory of the Orange Tree came out. So I definitely recommend, even if Priory wasn't, like, a favorite of yours, I think this one has definitely different strengths. So it's worth a read. It's an investment, obviously. This took me about 2 weeks to read, which is a long time for me to read a single book. So, and I was only reading this book. I was not listening to like any audiobooks or anything during that time. I was devoting all of my energy to this. It kind of threw off the pacing of my month, but it was worth it in my opinion. So I gave this one like 4.5 out of 5 stars because it had a couple shortcomings, but I still had a really good time with it, and when I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it a lot, and I think I will be thinking about it for a very long time. And this last week, I snuck in a couple more books right before the end of the month, which I'm really happy with because, like I said, Day of Fallen Night kind of threw off my pacing for the reading that I had planned this month. But I picked up Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, and this is exactly what I needed after Day of Fallen Night. This was such a super fast, plot-driven book, and I had so much fun. I was listening to the audiobook mostly for this book, but I did read it like in tandem a couple of times, and I gotta tell you, the audiobook is fantastic. The narrator does a really good job with like different accents, and I just thought that enhanced the experience a lot, and I loved her voice for Karu as well. Like, she just embodied the character very well. So this book follows a character named Karu, and she is a teenager living in Prague and going to art school and trying to live kind of like a normal life, but she is definitely not normal. In fact, she was raised by a family of chimera, and her home base is kind of this shop with a door that will open to several cities within the world. And she uses these doors to go out and collect teeth for her sort of father figure named Brimstone, who uses these teeth for some reason. She's not quite sure why, but in exchange for teeth, people get wishes. And there's different values of wishes, like stronger wishes than others, and there's just a lot of mystery there. She's grown up in this shop, but she's not sure what the purpose of the teeth are. But one day while she's going out into the world to help Brimstone, she comes across a beautiful stranger named Akiva, and Akiva turns her life kind of upside down. I'm not going to get any more into it than that. I just recommend that you read it. It is very good, and again, the plot is so fast and so fun. The romance is a little insta-lovey, but like for reasons. And those reasons are kind of spoilery, so I'm not going to get into it. But, like, I didn't hate it. And normally I would. So I think Laini Taylor, she's really good at using tropes that I'm normally, like, kind of side-eye about and, like, making me fall in love with it. I had so much fun, and the last chapter broke my heart. And I can't wait to read book 2 in this series. So I gave this one 4 out of 5. Strange the Dreamer still ranks a little higher for me, and I think that's probably why I gave this one a 4 rather than like a 5. Not saying she like under-delivers with this one, but I couldn't help but think about like, Strange the Dreamer while I read this book. So, well, I think this is a great expansion upon the sort of multiverse thing that she's got going on. My heart still lies with Laszlo. Then finally, I finished this literally March 31st at like 9 p.m., so really getting it in under the wire. We have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. This was a very anticipated book of mine and of a lot of people's. This is a very popular YA author, and this is her first adult book, so I think expectations were high. The story was kind of sold as like a gothic romance, and I think that is a disservice to this book because it, I think, gave people different expectations than like what the book turned out to be. And I went into this knowing that, like, I'd seen several kind of meh reviews mentioning that, so I tried to readjust my expectations. I don't mind a book that is like pure vibes, no plot, and this wasn't quite that. There was a plot, but my problem with it is I guessed the ending like so early, it really impacted my feelings of the end of the book. I was like, oh, okay, that played out exactly how I expected it to. So where I think the main motivator to read this book is like the mystery and the intrigue of this situation, it was never mysterious or intriguing to me. I was like, yep, this is going exactly how I expected. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It just sort of reinforces the feeling that I had that, like, I've seen this story before. I've seen this scenario play out in other fashions before. So, I don't know. This wasn't anything, like, new or groundbreaking. I did think the writing was lovely. I guess I should probably mention what the heck this story is about. An unnamed narrator deemed the bridegroom meets a very intriguing woman named Indigo, and they both have a very deep love of fairy tales, and that's kind of why they click, and they get married, but under the condition that the bridegroom not look into Indigo's past, to not pry, to not ask questions, and when he promises that he won't, he's pretty sure of this promise, but she's eventually called back to her childhood home to say goodbye to a dying relative, and it brings up a lot of things about her past that the bridegroom can't help but try to figure out. As a lover of stories and fairy tales himself, this whole situation kind of feels like one, and so he finds himself, unfortunately, prying. So, it was okay. Again, writing was lovely, didn't knock my socks off. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Those are all the books that I read, and I'm just going to kind of quickly go over some of the manga that I read if you're interested in that. First up is Spy Family Volume 9. This came out this month, and I had this pre-ordered. Like, I was so excited to read this, and it was so good. This series is a consistent, like, 5-star read for me. I just love this world. I love these characters so much. The storyline, just everything about it is, like, perfect. So this one feels a little, like, of a transition between arcs, but there were some really solid sort of little standalone stories in this as well. Particularly the one involving Becky is equal parts horrifying and hilarious, and I laughed out loud like several times during that chapter. So, oh Becky, if you know, you know. I thought this is just, it's an incredible balance of ridiculous and heartwarming and wholesome, and I can't wait for the next volume. That's the only downside of being caught up on this series is just the wait. There's like the 6-month wait between volumes. So I'm sure I'll reread this because this is like my comfort series at this point. And if you haven't read Spy Family, what are you doing? Amazon was doing like a buy one get one 50% off at some point during the month. So I picked up volumes 1 and 2 of My Happy Marriage. I had this series recommended to me by my friend Stephanie, and it's kind of a Cinderella retelling, but like possibly even more depressing, because her father's not dead, he just hates her. Our main character, Mio, is the daughter of this noble family who have, like, this special power called the Sight, but she doesn't have this power, so she's kind of disowned. Her father ends up remarrying after her mother dies, and the woman he marries is actually like his childhood sweetheart who he couldn't marry for political reasons. So this woman hates her because she's a reminder of like the woman that took her love away when she was a like young person herself. Her father and stepmother end up having a daughter who has the power of their family and is perfect and beautiful, and so Mio is like treated as a servant. Honestly, worse than a servant. She's treated like dirt, and it's so sad. And I think when she becomes of age, she gets married off, or engaged rather, to a very powerful noble. I can't remember his name, Kyoka Kudo. Her father does this with the expectation that Kyoka will cast her out. He's been engaged several times, but it's never lasted. And once she is cast out, Mio's father has no plans of bringing her back into his household. So he doesn't care what happens to her. Plot twist, the man that she is affianced to actually, like, is very intrigued by her and her whole scenario. She's not the spoiled rich girl that he has been engaged to many times in the past. She's very sweet and helpful around the house, and possibly romantic feelings bloom between them. You'll have to read and find out. So this is equal parts like very sweet and very depressing. I wish there were more volumes out in English. There's only these 2 at the moment. I think 3 comes out sometime in the next couple of months. This was very good. Just, you know, go into it knowing that the main character is treated like dirt by her family and her family sucks. So I gave these both like 3.5 out of 5. And finally, I found this on Pango Books for like $3. So I was like, yeah, why not? I've seen it around. There's an anime. If I like the manga, I'll watch the anime. You know. And that is The Ancient Magus' Bride, Volume 1. I have seen this compared to ACOTAR a lot on TikTok. And I can kind of see it like if you squint. but I think it depends on how this develops. So I've only read the first volume, so I can't really say how well that comparison is made, but this follows a young girl named Chise Hitori who has a very dark past. No one in her family wants her after her mom passes away, so she's passed around from relative to relative, and like they don't care about her. So she's at the point where she is considering taking her own life, and she's approached by a mysterious person who's like, hey, don't do that. Instead, sell yourself into slavery in this magic world because you are this thing known as like a sleigh buggy, which is like it's kind of complicated, sorry. She draws like magical beings to her, like something about her draws them in, and she's kind of like a well of magical power, even though she is human. So she is sold at auction to this guy, this ancient Magus guy, for an incredible amount of money, and he is like, you're gonna be my apprentice, and like takes her chains off and stuff. So she's technically sold, but like he respects her and she's just kind of happy to have like a home where she's wanted. So kind of starts off on a weird foot. He does refer to her as his bride and jokes about going on their honeymoon several times. And she's kind of like, wait, are you serious? Like, so far he's only treated her as an apprentice, and he is very protective of her. He has made no like creepy advances towards her. I do expect this to be like a romance in the long run. I will admit I was side-eyeing the age gap. She's like 15. He is the titular ancient mage. So my liking of this is very dependent on how this story develops, because obviously there's this giant power imbalance between them, this age gap. If she continues to grow and like become a very powerful mage with like in her own right, I'll be happy. I'm very intrigued by this guy. His name is Elias. I believe he was human at one point, so I want to know what happened for him to get this weird animal skull on his face, because that's definitely weird. But yeah, again, I'm intrigued by the world, but the romance, I'm watching you, Elias. I'm watching you. So that wraps up my March reading. I'm pretty happy overall. I didn't have like a whole lot of 5-star knock me out of the park kind of reads, but it was very satisfactory overall. I read more than I thought I would. Kind of at the halfway point in the month, I was like, oh no, but turned out all right. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know if you've read any of these down in the comments below. I would love to talk about them. What did you read in March? Please let me know. Again, send me recs. I'm always looking for them. And yeah, thank you again for watching. Feel free to leave a comment, like this video, subscribe to my channel if you aren't already, and as always, have a lovely day. Bye.